Okay, it started recording.
Welcome to the February 11th Environmental Board meeting. I'm Don McWilliams, I'll be the chair tonight. Our meeting tonight is hybrid, so we have some people online while the others in person. Those of you online, if you want to ask questions, just raise your virtual hand and I'll be keeping an eye on the screen up there. And I'll call on you when I see your hand up. For those of you in the room, you would tip your little card up. I'll call around as I see cards go up. Daisy, can you take us through roll call, please?
Yes. Tommy Anderson,
Here.
Nancy Davidson,
Here.
Tommy Dubois,
Here.
Todd Bundy,
Here.
Karen Pan,
Here.
Nina June, Don McWilliams,
Here.
Alex Lee Tigner,
Here.
Ann Newcomb,
Here.
Keith Gonzalez,
Here.
and John Smith.
Here.
We have quorum.
Next up, approval of minutes. Is there any changes to the minutes from the last meeting that anybody? Hearing none, we'll call those approved. Public comments. So we have a couple of folks in the room.
Yes, we received 2 written comments from Connie Marsh and Ann Fletcher, both on the ICAP target for tree canopy. Ann or Dave, do either of you want to make verbal comments as well?
I would.
Okay.
Briefly.
Yeah.
Did you?
You want to read the?
Oh, yeah.
The public comment.
I didn't not say any bad words.
Yeah. We've done it a few times, but
I think it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes.
5 right now.
5 minutes for public comments. You can tell us your name, your problem.
Good evening. Great to be here. Sorry we were a little late. My name is Ann Fletcher and I'm a resident and PCA, People for Climate Action member. And I just wanted to first of all thank the staff and the board for your continuing efforts to update the ICAP. Good changes. 5 years ago, I can remember the first one and all the work that went into it and all the input. Some of the reasons behind some of the things that we did and some of them are still good ideas and some of them need to be changed. But in terms of the materials that were sent out, the new actions in the natural systems and in the resiliency section, I thought that they seemed really reasonable to add in those new actions. And then some of the things were moved and reorganized, which made a lot of sense to where they needed to go. So I thought those seemed really good. The main thing I wanted to talk about was the natural systems target. So not the action, but the target. I do remember that this target was very aspirational back 5 years ago, and targets should be aspirational. I think they should reflect the values of the community, and in that respect, I don't think we should be lowering those targets unless our values have changed or something has changed, and I need to understand better if something has changed, why we would do that. I don't think that our values have changed. We still have 9 years left. We've got 5 years in to reach the current target of 55% tree canopy by 2035. That's near the end of when this new update is going to go a little longer, I understand. And so it seems something to aim for by that time. It seems reasonable to me. Instead of changing the target, perhaps based on input or whatever, perhaps there's a trajectory of where we are now using the methods and the resources that we currently have that shows that maybe we won't make that. We should consider other creative ways where we might reach the target. And if we currently don't have the resources to do that, to do both that and the other critical actions that I've talked about with this group before, which is the buildings, transportation, and the things that are lowering our, if we don't have the resources to do both, then that's a budget issue. And I think that should be brought up as an issue and discussed if it is. So I feel like it's all important, of course. And so it's not like an either or having to make that choice. It should be a both and. And so I do think this scenario should be brought up before the council, committees, boards, commissions, whatever's relevant. And so that they and the council just are aware of the choices that we have, the different trade-offs that are relative to our community values. I am unclear why the no net loss wording is needed now, or how it would help the values behind the current target or make a difference in reaching any of the targets. So I'm here to listen tonight and learn about that. But the target itself seems clear enough and pretty easy to measure. I do want to end by saying nature with its plant and animal life systems are the foundation that we're trying to protect for humanity. And we need to always go back to that value that we have. They are also our built-in insurance for climate change, and they should be stewarded and enhanced mightily. We need to hold a firm line on this. And I did get the following advice when I went to a parenting class once that I never forgot. It was, decide what is highly important to you. And then on those things, be at least 1 ounce more persistent than your children. And I never forgot that. It still allows, yeah. And it still allows negotiation and learning on some things, but you have a guideline there. So I just think maybe we should think about that. That's how I think about it, applying this advice to our crucial natural systems, with trees being a good ecosystem and habitat indicator for a target, since it seems like maybe we weren't able to find something else. I don't know, and I'm here to learn about that too. Thank you.
Yeah.
David Kepler at 255 Southeast Andrew Street. I lead a hike for the senior center every month. And today we went south to the parkland at the south border of the city. And in the past, in there, it's been pretty torn up by floods and all. And some of the boardwalks had got shifted and things like that. And I hadn't been there after this last flood a month ago or whatever, and I was expecting things to be worse. And it was amazing how well the city has worked in there. Of course, it's only 1,000 feet of city, Issaquah Creek upstream of it, and miles and miles of King County. But it's just amazing how well this city is doing in dealing with the flood. And back at Confluence Park, when I've been back in there too, it was pretty amazing what we've been able to do there in terms of protecting the letting it flood, but not having it all that erosion and other problems and going down into Lake Sammamish and the rest. So it's that's a positive. In terms of this, where we're trying to make sure we're catching solar energy in our city and where it's most important to have that canopy. I think the downtown area, that's to me, it seems like that seems the wrong play. How do you expect to have the downtown and have a canopy? But a lot of the residential area, we have that, and we have a certain amount of it in some of the business areas. And there's a real advantage to having that. Typically, that's where we have more senior housing, more affordable housing, and those kinds of things. And those people might not have the money to have a rooftop of solar that's running their air conditioning and those kinds of things. So there's a real advantage to making sure we don't lose tree canopy in the downtown. It's kind of counterintuitive. It seems like it's easier to grow it up on the hills and all, but where it matters to me the most in terms of people and the environment is closer to the valley floor. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have one more person, Steve, for online, but it looks like he's dropped off. So if he comes back, I'll check in with him, see if he wanted to make comment.
Okay, ready to move into our agenda items. Tonight, we're going to hear about the greenhouse gas emissions update, David. We're going to hear emergency management overview from Jared. And then Stacy's going to walk us through the natural systems and water resources, as well as community resilience. Portions of that.
Okay. Since this is my screen, I might not even have to share my screen.
Yeah.
I think I can just pull it up. So we're gonna do that. And
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask.
online people won't be able to see it. Good point. Okay.
Yeah, we're working through some technical workarounds here, so 1 second. Yeah, it's showing up.
Showing up. Okay. Okay. Great. Well, we'll start the conversation today with our report on the 2024 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. This inventory, as with previous inventories, can be used to help us think through the ICAP update and some of the other conversations we've been having related to that ICAP update, as well as the ones coming up. So just as a brief summary, our presentation goals for today on this is simply to update the environmental board on the 2024 community-wide and government operations inventory, and then have discussions and answer questions related to how the inventory findings are impacting the ICAP update, programs, projects, etc. As a brief background on our greenhouse gas inventories calculate, quantify, and assess greenhouse gas emissions in the city and their sources. And we look at it both on the community-wide scale, so across all emissions associated with the city of Issaquah's community, and then we also look at it from the scale of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with our government operations. We have completed the 2024 greenhouse gas inventory. In the original ICAP, we had set out that we would be doing these inventories every 2 years. It does take about a year and a little bit to actually get these inventories complete, just given the availability of data. But the point of these inventories, again, is to measure how we're doing and assess where our emissions are going as it relates back to our climate action plan targets. Through these inventories, as we're doing them on a regular cadence, we can review trends, we can review progress, and really understand where we're making progress and where we might be falling short. I will note the 2024 inventory has the same methodology going back to 2017. So we have 4 inventories that have the same methodology. The 2 older inventories, 2012 and 2007, did use an older inventory methodology. So the best comparison that we have is going back to 2017. As a quick background on greenhouse gas inventories, again, we've done them in the city of Issaquah back since 2007. Other entities have done them for much longer than that. But really, they are complex methods to try and understand at that time what is our best understanding of greenhouse gas emissions. Our methodologies for measuring these greenhouse gas emissions changes over time as we have a evolving understanding of these emissions, as we get better measurement tools and tracking opportunities. One thing that we generally know going into these greenhouse gas inventories, something that we knew at the beginning back in 2007 and continues to be true today, is that the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions come from our transportation and built environment. And you'll see that as a theme throughout the presentation today. Our process is we do these in coordination with our East Side Climate Partnership cities of Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland, and Mercer Island. We've been doing this together since 2022. And so for Issaquah, this is the second time we've done it in partnership with these cities. And we've worked with Cascadia Consulting to do the inventories, both for the 2024 inventory and the 2022 inventory. We follow best practices across the country and use some of the leading greenhouse gas emissions inventory software to try and make sure that what we're doing is in alignment with the other East Side cities, regional best practices, and national best practices as well. This, as I mentioned, does represent our 6th community-wide greenhouse gas inventory and actually only our 2nd government operations inventory. So the 2022 was our first government operations inventory. And so this inventory is allowing us to actually start to see trends and data over time in our government operations. Additionally, this is the first wedge analysis we've done since ICAP adoption. So I'll be digging into that in a little bit more in the future, but that allows us to understand, forecast out what are our emissions going to do over the next 25 years based on state and federal policies, as well as kind of thinking about what are our city policies going to do to address greenhouse gas emissions here in the city. Putting our greenhouse gas inventories in context, between 2007 and 2024, we have experienced significant population and business growth. Over that same time frame, our emissions are higher in 2024 compared to 2007, but the emissions per capita, per person, or per business in the city has dropped significantly since 2007. We'll be using the inventory results to help us with the ICAP update, define targets related to our municipal operations, and think through our programs and policies at the city. One of the final kind of context setting items I'll mention right now is that these inventories are based off a lot of different data pieces that range from direct activity reporting, and that means things like exact electric usage, say in the city or at city buildings. It's based off of models, so regional models trying to understand things like vehicle miles traveled within the city that are, or within the region that are then scaled down to city size. And then even some assumptions where we might not have the best model or the exact information that we're looking for, but we can make assumptions based on best practices around how emissions should be calculated or what emissions might be associated with certain activities such as city solid waste generation. Some top takeaways from our 2024 inventory, without further ado, are actually quite similar to our 2022 inventory. So some of these might be similar to the, you might remember these from a couple of years ago when I gave this presentation, but consistent with previous assessments, the largest sources of community-wide and government operations emissions continue to be transportation, those associated with transportation and the built environment. Existing city actions are generally in line with these largest emission sources. And so we'll be talking about how they are going to be influencing our climate action plan update. And then reaching our targets and goals is going to require continued and then expanded local, state, utility, and federal action and investment. When I talk about the wedge analysis, policies at the state and federal level are helping us get closer to our targets, but they're not quite there. So we're going to have to think about how can we both continue the momentum we have, but also expand that in the future. And then most community-wide emissions reductions over the last 7 years since we've had the same methodology have come from utility and state action. But I will note over the last 2 years since the 2022 inventory, the Puget Sound Energy Utility Grid has actually had a higher carbon intensity. So it's actually gotten a little dirtier over the last 2 years. And so the emissions reductions that we have seen over the last 2 years specifically does not come from utility action, although that is still the driving force over the last 7 years. John, I can take a quick question while we're going.
Which is the largest? Is it built environment or transportation?
Built environment.
Built environment's larger.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm. So on our community-wide emissions, this is kind of showing it over time. You'll see 2007 all the way on the left and our most recent emissions inventory all the way on the right. 2024 and 2022 look very close in size on the bar graph, and that's because we've had a 2% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions over the last 2 years. Interestingly, we did see a reduction in both built environment and transportation related emissions with some really interesting data there. So specifically within the built environment, I mentioned that the Puget Sound energy mix did get dirtier over the last 2 years. And so the big emissions reduction that we saw in the built environment was actually a decrease in natural gas use in both residential and commercial sectors, about 11% over the last 2 years. So that actually counteracted the fact that the emissions associated with electricity generation increased over the last 2 years. Transportation is another very interesting source in that we did see a very small decrease in transportation emissions, even while we saw a return to transportation travel similar to pre-pandemic levels. So we had quite a big increase in vehicle miles traveled over the last 2 years compared to 2022. But at the same time, we still saw reductions in transportation emissions. And so a lot of that can be associated with the improvement of fuel economy of vehicles, as well as electrification of vehicles in the region. So both of those are interesting stories to tell as we kind of dig into this. I will also say we did see a slight increase in process and fugitive emissions. Those are mostly from refrigerants. We went from about 5% to 6% for that, and then a small increase in water and wastewater emissions as well. Nancy.
Sent you an email question. You mentioned.
Yes. Yes. So the way that this emissions inventory is assessed is it's a geographic based emissions inventory. So in transportation emissions in particular, it does evaluate the vehicle miles traveled within the boundaries of the city of Issaquah. And that does include then pass-through traffic that's going on I-90 and other corridors. The Issaquah vehicle miles traveled is based on the Puget Sound Regional Council VMT model, and then scaled down to the Issaquah size and boundaries. That is a little different than some other East Side cities. Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond have their own transportation model that they use. It's still geographic based, but they have a slightly updated or more specific model that they get to use, whereas ours is a little bit more regional, scaled down to the Issaquah size. Generally, these emissions are taking place within the city of Issaquah, but that is not always the case. So for instance, emissions associated with our electricity use happens at electric plants, Puget Sound energy plants, and similarly the waste emissions measures the waste generated in the city, but that those actual emissions are happening at Cedar Grove, for instance, for compost or at recycling centers outside of city boundaries. Happy to keep taking some questions.
Yeah, well, very much related to that, the modeling for determining the percentage of electric vehicles versus internal combustion. Is it looking directly at vehicles registered within the city limits, or is it a more abstract model than that? How is that?
My understanding is it's a regional measurement of electric vehicles as a percent of vehicles registered and sold, and then scaled down to the Issaquah size. So it isn't explicitly the number of vehicles registered in Issaquah that are electric, but rather a regional number that's scaled to then Issaquah.
I noticed that Redmond actually monitors that as a measurable, they report on their dashboard. Number of electric vehicles registered within the city limits of Redmond.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's something that you can get a handle on, and that would give us a little more localized data for what's going on in the city. I guess I'm wondering whether we are just the same as the region or whether we are an outlier. It's interesting. Perhaps down in the weeds.
It is something that we did notice in the updated Redmond Climate Action Plan. They do have that listed out as a metric that they're measuring and reporting on. So it is something that we can certainly take a look at digging into on our side as well.
Well, regardless of how it gets fed into the model, I think that it would be a valuable thing to put on our dashboard in as much as it is something that can be objectively measured in a reliable and consistent way from year to year. And so that has value.
Okay.
Raj. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Raj.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, David. So, couple of questions here. The first thing is, can you elaborate again on what is the built environment emissions? And the second question I had was what you said about the, regional model being scaled down to Issaquah size. I'm guessing that's true for transportation and mobile sources, but for at least for solid waste, water and wastewater, we should have our own city data, right? Or is that the same kind of data we are getting for all types of emissions?
Great question. So I'll tackle the second. Tackle the first one first. So built environment relates to generally energy use within our buildings. So it's measuring electricity use and natural gas use, as well as fuel oil in our buildings within the city of Issaquah. That directly relates to the second question, which is that each of the aspects of the greenhouse gas inventory have their own measurement systems and data sources. So the regional data that is scaled to Issaquah is generally used in the transportation emissions sector. Built environment, when we're looking at electricity use, natural gas use, that's actually given to us directly from Puget Sound Energy related to how much electricity and natural gas is used within the city boundaries, right? So that one's not a scaled model at all. Similarly, waste emissions are also not a scaled model. That's something that we measure. There are some other models that are then scaled to the city. One of the big examples of this is actually some refrigerant emissions, which are scaled down from a national model based on EPA recommendations. And that's been kind of the best practice over the last 7 years. And generally, we don't have a better localized model for those refrigerant emissions yet. So each emissions source is, some of them are direct reporting, some are models. And then when the full report, when you look at the full report, which is currently on our website, the very end of that does go through each of those emission sources and how those are determined.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding the bill, this might be similar to what you just answered. I think that since say 2017, our built environment number of buildings has increased.
Correct.
Okay. What do you attribute the decrease in greenhouse gas emissions?
Yeah, so since 2017, the largest driver of the decrease in greenhouse gas emissions in the built environment is the fuel mix within Puget Sound Energy's electric grid.
Okay.
So over that time frame,
So it's nothing the city's done.
Not quite. So that's the largest driver is the utilities fuel mix, and kind of that fuel mix over time has gotten less carbon intensive.
Okay.
Over the last 2 years, it's actually gotten more carbon intensive, right? And we've seen an 11% drop in natural gas use and emissions in residential and commercial sectors. That is, I would say, can be directly connected to a number of city programs specifically focused on supporting folks with heat pumps and things like that, the Clean Buildings program at the city and at the state level. So the mix of kind of all of the different pieces that go into play for reducing those built environments, a huge part of that is utility, but then there are also those sections that are because of state and local actions as well. Any other questions on kind of our community-wide emissions?
Just one quick.
Yeah, of course. Mhm.
Is it generally heated with as opposed to natural gas?
I think generally yes, but it will depend.
Yeah, the state building code, which the city has adopted, has pretty strict energy efficiency requirements. The state, my understanding, was going towards kind of an all electric that was challenged. And so there's allowances that's more calculated by energy efficiency. So buildings built today are way more efficient than
So
was
when
built
a
10 years
you know,
ago.
contractor builds a building that's got, say, a big apartment building that's got every unit's got an electric resistance heat system. Does that contribute to greenhouse gases?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any electricity generated in the city, we're counting towards our greenhouse gas emissions. And so new development in the city does increase our greenhouse gas emissions. Some of I'll get to this in a minute, but one of the biggest tools we have to address that is the Clean Energy Transformation Act at the state level, which requires utilities to go to 100% renewable energy in their fuel mix over the next 10 years. So because of that, once utilities in theory get fully renewable energy in their fuel mix, then a new building that has all electric heating, cooling, things like that, then it wouldn't really increase our greenhouse gas emissions because it's associated with renewable energy generation. Currently, that's not the case. And so the new electric use just generally increases electric use in the city and therefore contributes to our greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we're probably still seeing buildings that are including natural gas, but that natural gas use equipment is probably much more efficient than it was 5 years ago in order to meet these efficiency standards set by the state. So still a mix. We don't have any kind of ban on natural gas, but they are required to be much more efficient.
See one more question from Raj, and then I'm gonna ask you guys to hold your questions till David gets done with the slide deck.
Sounds good. Sounds
We
good.
could spend a whole meeting on this.
Raj?
Thanks. So David, one quick question. I was wondering, the 2% decrease, if you can speak to that, because primarily because all the data in various emission types is not necessarily direct data. Some of that is derived from models. And, I'm not undermining any efforts done by the city. What I'm getting at is I am wondering from 22 to 24, and probably from 24 to 26 means what I'm getting at is, lots of initiatives and greenhouse gas emission reduction or sustainability initiatives, which an effort put in by the city. Are we going, So 22 to, in my mind, 2022 to 2024 seems like at a plateau. I don't know how much that 2% emission decrease really counts. But see, I don't know the full picture or what all is going into it. So I wanted to check if you can speak to that. And are we expecting a better decrease in 2026? Because some of these initiatives may actually start showing, or come in effect, as we progress. That was my question.
Yeah, so the decrease that we saw over the last 2 years, that's where I was mentioning it really was driven through reductions in natural gas use in buildings, both residential and commercial buildings specifically, as well as increased levels of electric vehicles and improved fuel economy of vehicles. And that's kind of that regional model that's scaled to Issaquah, but based on our regional transportation data, we can tell that there's fewer emissions associated with more vehicle miles traveled, actually. So those are really the two drivers of that 2% reduction. I would say any reduction is a good reduction. This 2% reduction doesn't quite put us on track to fully address our greenhouse gas emissions and hit those targets that we have set out for us within the climate action plan. As to whether or not we'll see a bigger drop over in 2026, I think we will continue to see drops based on the implementation of our programs related to fossil fuel use reduction as cars become less carbon intensive. And then it'll be interesting, I think, to see what happens in Puget Sound Energy's fuel mix, as well as how the implementation of other state and federal programs continue to be rolled out.
So you expect to see a decline, is what you're saying, a declining trend?
I think I am still expecting to see a declining trend, and I would say I'm hoping to see a declining trend.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So moving ahead, where does this inventory really lead us? And so this is our updated wedge analysis. And just to help kind of understand what we're looking at, the bottom dotted red line is the ICAP greenhouse gas reduction targets, where we need to go based on the climate action plan. The top black dotted line is our historic emissions estimate, assuming we didn't take any action and we just let our emissions go the way that they had been going historically. The pink line down at the bottom is the current forecast of where our emissions will be based on the implementation of all of those policies on the right-hand side of the screen. So things like the Washington State Energy Code, the Clean Buildings Act, the Clean Energy Transformation Act, et cetera. And so all of those policies are intended to bring us down to that pink line. And the gray area is that emissions gap between where those policies are forecasted to bring us and where our ICAP targets are. Now, the policies that are currently adopted at the state and federal level, those are expected to reduce our emissions by 42% by 2030, so get us close to that 50% reduction target. And then I believe it was 60 some odd percent by 2050, so a little farther away from that 2050 target. These forecasts are forecasts. They help us predict what's going to happen in the future, but predictions are notoriously difficult to really model and understand as we continue to face changing conditions. In our ICAP update process, we will be thinking about how our ICAP actions can help reduce that gray area of the graph, that emissions gap. And we'll be working with Cascadia Consulting to identify and evaluate a couple of our key actions to see how those actions are going to actually dig into that emissions gap itself. The other thing I'll note here is that getting to that pink line, getting that as much emissions reduction as we're currently looking on this graph does require the full implementation of those state, utility, and federal policies. that's a tall order right now. And so one of the things that we need to continue to think about is not only action at the local level, but also continued advocacy at the state and federal level as well, to make sure that we are fully implementing the programs that we have passed and that climate folks have fought for a long time. Switching over to government operations inventory briefly, we saw about a 4% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions over the last 2 years. Much of that can be associated with connecting more of our electric accounts with the Puget Sound Energy Green Power Program. So it connects our electric use in the city with renewable energy generation in the Western US. So we had already had much of our electric accounts connected to one of the Puget Sound Energy Green programs, and we've worked to connect more and more of our electric accounts to that program over the last 2 years. And we are hoping to address really the rest of that 9% emissions through that same system of using the Puget Sound Energy Green programs. And that electric use is really related to our street light use throughout the city. As you can see here, it is a similar story in that natural gas use is the largest single contributor to greenhouse gas emissions at the city. As I've mentioned in the past, there are a couple buildings that still use natural gas at the city, and electrifying those buildings is a large project, or large projects. We do have some exciting ones coming up, including electrifying the community center. So that's one that we'll be looking at this year and working on this year. We do continue to have significant emissions from on-road fleet transportation, as well as our second largest wedge here, which is related to our employee commute. And part of the increase that we've seen in these emissions over the last 2 years is based on more regular attendance in office compared to 2022 for employees, as well as just increased activity because of the return to pre-pandemic levels of service and operating systems. I will also note there was actually a noticeable increase in government operations emissions associated with the bomb cyclone in 2024, specifically related to diesel use at our generators during that period, as well as increased compost amounts as the city was cleaning up after the bomb cyclone. So all good things in that, those were important actions for the city to take, but it did actually show up in our government operations inventory. We will be using this data and the trends over the last 2 years to help inform recommended government operations greenhouse gas reductions targets and help us understand what it would actually take to reach those targets. So stay tuned for that. You'll see those coming up fairly soon. Just to leave y'all today, I wanted to mention a couple things that are specifically helping us address emissions sources within the community, as well as from our government operations. On the community-wide side, we have programs like Energy Smart Eastside, which is helping folks electrify their homes and transition off of natural gas heating systems. We have our Clean Buildings Incentive Program. We've kicked off or are kicking off our Tier 2 kicking it off for Tier 2 buildings, which is between 20,000 square feet and 50,000 square feet this year. And that will help us also improve energy efficiency within some of the largest buildings within Issaquah. And then we have a number of different programs, again, at the state and federal level, as well as some local plans, such as the Transportation Improvement Plan, that are helping us address emissions in the built environment and transportation. Within the government side, we are continuing facilities upgrades. I mentioned we're going to work to decarbonize the community center this year. We have a number of renewable energy projects planned for this year as well. We've been installing EV charging infrastructure and transitioning our fleet to electric vehicles over the last couple of years. And we've been actively working to connect our electric use to Puget Sound Energy Green programs. So those are all some of the largest factors we're doing to address our government operations emissions. Our next steps will be partnering with departments across the city to leverage the results for budget requests, projects, policies, and really think through how we can continue to keep momentum on greenhouse gas reduction and accelerate that momentum moving forward. We're using the data for the 2026 ICAP update, so you'll see that data show up in that document and help in how we're thinking about the update moving forward. And then we do anticipate the next greenhouse gas emissions inventory to cover our 2026 emissions, the year we're currently in. And that data will begin getting gathered in early 2027. So we'll have that data in hopefully early 2028. With that, I can take any last questions up to, not quite sure what my
2
time.
minutes, maybe?
1 or 2 minutes. And
Yeah.
otherwise, I'm more than happy to meet with folks elsewise to talk in depth about this. The report is up on the website if you want to dig into this more. It's very exciting and fun work, so happy to talk more about it.
I have a very quick question.
Yeah.
Roughly what percentage of total is government ops?
About, it's under 1%, so about 56%. Sorry, 0.56%. Correct.
So most of the impact is on the.
Yes, so to address our overall emissions, we will have to, for the most part, address community-wide emissions. Government operations are important for us to consider, both to lead by example for the city, make sure that we're doing things that we're telling our community to do, as well as there are some of the emissions we have the greatest ability to address, just because we own the buildings and run the fleet.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, next up, we're gonna hear from Jared Schneider, the city's emergency manager. Emergency management.
So we're gonna, yep, sorry, we'll get there.
Well, thank you for doing that. I'll introduce myself. So yeah, my name is Jared Schneider. I'm the emergency manager for the city of Issaquah. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was with King County's Office of Emergency Management for about 5, and before that I was with the Red Cross up in Snohomish County. So I've been in this role for a little bit now, long enough to see some things happen here in our little town. But yeah, ultimately, I'm really excited to talk to you all because yeah, I work really closely with Stacy and David, and the worlds of sustainability and emergency management are getting driven ever and ever closer together. And so I'm really happy to come before you all and talk a little bit about how our work intertwines and how we approach emergency management in the city. I should say, Stacy presented me and Dave presented me with the ultimate challenge of doing this in 15 minutes. So I could probably talk for 15 hours about this, which I will spare you from. But with that being said, you know, if there's more questions or if you want to know more about any of the things that I talk about today, I'm happy to meet with anyone and share just more information. So with that, the first thing I want to talk about is disasters in Washington State. So here we have a simple bar chart showing when Washington State has had disasters declared in it over the last 5 years. And so you'll notice there's fire, flood, severe storm, and then all other declarations included on there, right? And so what you'll notice is the things that are being declared are mostly climate-driven disasters and emergencies, right? And so speaking of science, this is one of the main ways, right, where we work together, right, is that our climate is changing, disasters are increasing, and you can see it, in the chart there. If you're, yeah, all right, David, next slide. Thanks. So the disasters that we plan for, that we think about in the city of Issaquah and our emergency management program really come into 2 different categories. We have natural disasters and then human-caused disasters. So for natural, we have earthquakes, volcanoes. You might be thinking, where's the volcanoes in Issaquah? No, it's the eruption and like the ash fall, right? That might impact us, right? We're not worried about lava in Issaquah. Landslides, wildfire, flood, and severe weather. Severe weather is a catch-all really for things like, bomb cyclones, big ice storms, heat domes, and the like. In human-caused disasters, we think about hazardous materials releases, right? So we have some pretty major thoroughfares, right? I-90 and some big production plants in Issaquah that house and carry a lot of hazardous materials. Health incident is something like a pandemic, COVID is an example, terrorism, cyber incidents, and then dam failures, something that we also plan for. Another thing you might be wondering, where's the dams in Issaquah? Well, some of our stormwater ponds are actually big enough to where they are classified as dams in Washington State. So we also plan for their failure. I was mentioning this a little bit, but our climate is changing. So this chart here is pulled from the climate vulnerability assessment that Stacy and David put together a couple of years ago now. And so I won't read all of these, right? But to summarize, things are getting more and more. Climate change is impacting our hazards, right? And increasing our vulnerability in all the categories, really, for our climate-driven hazards. So how do we approach this, right? What's the city's approach to climate resilience and making sure that we're prepared, really, for all these disasters that we're talking about? We have three major categories. One is emergency response, and that really speaks to the city's response, how we engage with these disasters. The second is community preparedness, right? It's kind of our public or facing programs. How do we get the community ready for these things? And finally, risk reduction. This is our long-term projects that we ultimately try to minimize our exposure doing longer-term actions. So I'll talk about all three of these things in more depth here. So emergency response is our first category. So really the goal here is to protect life, property, and the environment during and after emergencies, large or small, right? And they typically happen in that order too, right? Life is always our priority, and then property, and then of course the environment, right, is the last in any disaster response really that you have, right? Those are kind of the three things that we think about. The ways that we engage with this are kind of the three things I want to highlight for you all is one, our comprehensive emergency management plan. The second is our emergency operations center, and then third is resilience hubs. So David, if you can answer the slide. First, let's talk about our comprehensive emergency management plan. So these are all photos from incidents that have happened since I've been here these last couple of years. The top left is a wildfire or a brush fire that happened outside of Crucian Lake. Bottom left is the flooding that we had just this last December. Bottom right is bomb cyclone, and then top right is not actually a disaster, but a drill that we did with Dairy Gold and our hazmat teams to simulate the release of a substance that might require emergency response. And so our comprehensive emergency management plan is really our guiding document that describes like how we are going to respond as a city to disasters. And so within there, you know, we set priorities, we give responsibilities to certain departments, to certain groups, describe their capabilities, and also just some of the things that we should be thinking about, right, for as a city for whatever emergency it is. And so the climate time in there is massive, right? It's a very natural alignment. All right, next slide, David. So the Emergency Operations Center, this is where it all happens. So this is kind of one place in Issaquah where we coordinate our disaster response. So we are not unique in this. For those that don't know, there's really one system that every city, county, state, and all the way up to the federal government uses to respond to disasters and emergencies. There's one common terminology and language that we use. It's called the Incident Command System. And so the value in this, right, is that it's a really scalable system that that the city has and all of our neighbors have, that we can assist one another in times of emergencies and disasters and make sure that we're all speaking a common language around emergency response. So the Emergency Operations Center is where the rubber really meets the road in that. That's where we set priorities during an incident. That's where we, you know, say where the public work crews are going to go, right, to clear roads, to plow, where, you know, our community planning development team, right, is going to go to look at houses that were, you know, damaged. These are kind of where all the action happens. This is where we get resources. Like, for example, during the flooding event, right, we needed like 100 tons more of like sand, you know, to support our flood fighting. And so that happened out of the EOC, right, is where we got that sand, and we worked with King County actually to fulfill that order. David and Stacy are also frequent members of going to the EOC, as many city departments and divisions are, right? It's just this one place, and that we all congregate. All right, a big part of one of our more, I would say, like newer efforts to increase the way or to better the way that our city responds to disasters is resilience hubs. By show of hands and also online, I'm sorry, it's a little harder to engage in this way, but did anyone go to a resilience hub during the bomb cyclone? Okay, or did anyone hear about them? All right, that's a good sign. So resilience hubs is actually an effort that that emergency management and the sustainability folks like have a partnership in. And really what they are locations that serve the community before, during, and after disasters. And so, you know, and before, it's the senior center that's pictured, right? And so that's a place that folks congregate, you know, to go do things like hikes and, you know, socialize, lunch and whatnot. During an emergency, right, this is what it looked like during the bomb cyclone. We had, you know, over 1,000 visitors to our resilience hubs during the bomb cyclone as a place where people could charge phones, get some snacks, really socialize, hear from like PSE, hear from PSE and other partners about available resources. And then after, they also hosted some recovery, or one of them was a location for some folks from the Small Business Administration come and help share like financial aid options for people who are impacted by a disaster. And so all that to say, this is not just a city ran thing. We actually have plenty of partners that are not city buildings. So for example, Blakely Hall is one of them. Issaquah Christian Church at the south end of town is one. And we have a handful of other partners that also don't own locations that are involved in this. And I think we're up to what, 8 or 9 now, David, across the city?
Something around there.
Yeah, the goal is to have one in every single neighborhood, right? So like if we have a big earthquake or something like that, there's a place that people can walk to, right? So that's my hope, an initial place where they can walk to, get some initial level of aid and service, and get connected to the broader range of city services and response resources. So yeah, we could talk forever about some of the stuff, but community preparedness, now I want to shift to that. So really this is, you know, informing and readying the community for disasters. And so we have 2 things, our community emergency response team I want to highlight, and then just broadly our trainings and engagements. So our CERT team, as we call them, of which I'm happy to see Keith on this call because Keith is actually a CERT member. So shout out Keith, thank you for taking the training and coming to some of our deployments. But our CERT team, they go through a training program that equips individuals with skills that may be beneficial to them, their families, and community in the event of a disaster and emergency. And so they get taught things like some advanced first aid, like cribbing, which is like how you lift heavy things off people, some base level like firefighting, search and rescue, some really cool things that are really useful to increasing individuals' own preparedness, but also they're a huge asset to the city as well too during times of emergencies. We actually use CERT members to help do things like filling sandbags, you know, at our community center, or going door to door to distribute flood cleanup kits, are some of the most recent missions. On the bar chart on the left, or on the graph that you see on the left in the bar chart, is just the amount of hours that this big cohort of volunteers contributes every year to the community. In 2025, we were just like under 7,000 volunteer hours, which is quite a lot, and it's a really great program. If you haven't taken it, I highly encourage you to. It's a really great way to serve your community and get better prepared yourself. In terms of trainings and engagements, so we do quite a bit of just regular, much lower commitment activities too in the city, right? So getting people ready for all these climate disasters. We have a classic cabling event on the left there, but on the right, we did like a wildfire trivia night in partnership with Eastside Fire and Rescue at Gaslamp and at Formula Brewing last summer, which was really fun. And we're always looking for kind of new ways to engage with the community and better prepare them for range of disasters that we have. The next thing I want to talk about is risk reduction, right? And so this is reducing the vulnerability of the city's infrastructure and community members through investment in long-term solutions to these disasters. And so There's two things I'm going to highlight. One is the mitigation plan, and the second is a wildfire evacuation study that we recently did. So the hazard mitigation plan, it's a planning process that we're just about to wrap up here in the city. Really what it does is it shows our vulnerability to each of these different hazards, describes what's at risk, the probability of a certain event happening, and really then says, okay, now that we know what we're up against, what are we going to do about it? And there's a whole bunch of hazard mitigation strategies that are associated with the plan that address those hazards. So I snagged a picture of the solar panels going up on the senior center from the design that's coming up as a good example, right, of not only an activity that increases our resilience, right, but also in this case, helps with lowering greenhouse gas emissions and also frees up like generators for other elements of our critical infrastructure, things like water pumps and sewer lift stations and things like that in the city. There's a whole bunch of other strategies within the plan, to just name a few, right? Like seismic retrofits are something that we think about, but also, sorry, no, and for other, climate-driven actions like wildfire, there's a whole lot. But we're about to release that plan shortly, and there'll be much more information to share about it soon. We did a wildfire evacuation study recently in Issaquah, right? This is probably, our climate-driven hazard that I would say the community is maybe the most interested in, all right, just generally speaking, seeing what's happened in other parts, of the country and, even locally, right? Like we had that wildfire, right? There's just a lot of interest and desire to know more, right, about our, about wildfire and to do things, in the city for it. And I should say, I totally agree with the community on that. That's something that obviously I'm very, concerned about as the emergency manager. So much so that we did this wildfire evacuation study that gave us time estimates for how long it would take 90% of the population of neighborhoods to evacuate in Issaquah. And so generally speaking, it was somewhere between 2 hours to about 2 hours, 15 minutes citywide. But what was also included in that study is some ways that we could permanently reduce the time that it would take individuals to evacuate. So Issaquah Highlands is our most challenging neighborhood to evacuate. It's very dense, right? But it doesn't have as many ways in and out of it as some of our other neighborhoods. And so, what you see up here on this slide is we built a hypothetical road going from the Grand Ridge neighborhood down to the High Point I-90 exit. And it's really small, so I know it's hard to see. But what you can see there is a reduction in time by creating this road by about 35 minutes, right, in evacuation time for that neighborhood. So those are the types of solutions, right, that like we're also interested in exploring in the city and implementing, right, to adapt to, some of these risks that we have from wildfire and climate change in general. So that is emergency management in the program in 15 minutes or less. And so, like I said, I could talk about it in depth for a very long time. I don't know how we're doing on time. Is there time for questions? Or
Yeah, we can take a couple. And
Okay.
the reason we wanted to cram it into tonight is because we're talking about community resilience and well-being actions in the ICAP. So we wanted to provide a little more context going into that. But yeah, we should take a couple of questions.
Great. Yeah.
I'll start off.
How are interactions between Eastside Fire and Rescue, which is not a city organization, coordinated with the city CERT?
Yeah, with the CERT team in particular. So we work really closely with Eastside Fire and Rescue, and our CERT team is included in that. So Eastside Fire and Rescue and our CERT is all part of our Emergency Operations Center organization. So both typically have a representative within our EOC structure, so they can coordinate and collaborate well. Now, Eastside Fire and Rescue also has their own volunteer program called Fire Corps. It's a group of individuals who mostly specialize in radio communication. And so that's another way that we interface with. So with them is that our volunteer groups actually train together in their radio operations, and they'll go together to like we're having an event called the Nasty Drill coming up in like just about a week, where Fire Corps and CERT they're going to go to Lake Sammamish State Park and like train together on radio and like CERT operation stuff. So I don't know if that's answering the heart of your question, but we work closely with them. Yeah.
Well, they also have a program called IWAR.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of curious as to whether IWAR was also going to become a thing in CERT, Issaquah CERT. And I observed, so my wife's on the CERT team.
Oh, great.
I'm
Yeah.
on the IWAR team.
Okay, awesome.
Fighting against each other. Well, it's my option. It's a new program, so I don't want to, denigrate things here, but it seems like there's a little disconnect between the Eastside Fire and Rescue, IWAR, and Issaquah CERT. But that's just an outside observation. But yet, many of the same people are on both teams.
Right.
So there's good things going. There's collaboration going on, but I wonder whether there was political reasons why they weren't more closely tied together.
Yeah. I'm happy to speak with you more about this after too, but really the long and short of it is that CERT is growing into radio in a more robust way as we're wrapping a program that we had that was specifically focused just around volunteer radio communication into CERT. And that's a new thing that's happening like as of a few months ago. So CERT is going to be stepping up into radio in a more expanded way than in the past. So yeah, but I'll talk to you more about that.
Okay.
I'm happy to. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah. You do tabletop exercises internally with your staff in different departments using the ICAP structure, but.
Yes, we do. Yep, we do them. And we're gonna have some coming up to prepare for World Cup and 4th of July, 250 coming up. We tend to do, 1 to 2 a year. We also have quite a bit of things that actually happen in this squad that turn out to be good practice, right, for our staff. And we try to keep those skills sharp. But
So
yes.
you're also doing the regional exercises that come around.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Thanks. So I think this is all great. These are all great efforts by the city. I particularly like, the resident trainings and engagement portion. And I was just curious to see if you have any numbers or percentage of, how many residents per se participated in these certifications or, the trainings.
Yeah, for the CERT training, we've had over 400 residents take it, and that's over the last. I think that's an 8-year number. I think that's when we started tracking it. Now, I will say that we've actually expanded the number of classes that we've had for CERT from 2 annually to 5, actually in the last 2 years, and so that's just been because there's been a really high demand for it, and we've had some local. Volunteers really champion more classes. And so, particularly up in Issaquah Highlands, like Blakely Hall, they have 2 whole classes that they host annually every year. And so, it's very popular. It's something that we'd love to do more of. CERT is really volunteer supported too. So it's always a balance of not burning out the great work that volunteers are doing, like trying to grow, right? But also growing at the same time.
Thank you.
And Nancy first. And then John.
There's another group that you might want to think about adding to your team, and that is pet partners and pet therapy animals. I had a dog registered in it. I'm now going through the program right now, but it's an opportunity to work, particularly in an earthquake situation, bringing animals in that are trained to work with kids and families and firefighters. I mean, we work in hospitals, so I just think that's another team that you might want to think about reaching out to and getting resources in your emergency situations.
That's great.
20 years ago, in my neighborhood, some church group came through, gave us an earthquake preparedness response training. And it was very useful. They taught people how to shut off their water, how to shut off gas, the need to prepare an earthquake kit for food and water. Just knowing your neighbors who has what resources. And it seems like 20 years ago, earthquakes were way more prevalent than they are today here. We're kind of losing track of that compared to fires. But found it very useful. So that might be a program we could do in the city to train neighborhoods how to do these things. Just, new people buying houses and where to shut off the electricity and the gas and things.
That's great.
Also, I just wanted to make a comment statement that I thought the city did a fantastic job responding to that. I was super impressed with how the city pulled together. Get that out.
Appreciate that. Yeah, certainly a team effort. Everyone from top to bottom was involved in the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate you coming.
Yeah. I'll stick around for this portion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Stacy, the rest of the time is yours.
All right, anybody need a stretch break or water before we move into the climate action plan?
There's cookies over there too.
Thank you. Feel free to get up if you need water, whatever. So we're gonna try and power through the last two focus areas of the climate action plan. Very happy to have Jared here as we work through the community resilience and well-being section. We worked really closely with him on that. Dan was hoping to be here for the natural systems section, but last minute was unable to, but we can always follow up with him with any questions. Before jumping into the presentation, I wanted just to provide a little additional context. David and I presented to the Planning, Development, and Environmental Committee of Council, made up of 3 of our council members last week, I believe. And they have requested that we come back to them in March and present a big, ambitious actions / policies that that we think will really move the needle in reducing emissions reducing emissions. So we are in the process of kind of looking across other cities in the country and in Vancouver in particular to pull in some of those most ambitious actions. A lot of those will be built environment, looking at energy reduction, transition away from gas or inefficient electricity, as well as transportation initiatives. We've already looked through those sections with you all, so just wanted to provide that heads up. We're going to be starting to look at some new policies and actions, vetting those in the next couple of weeks with some other boards and commissions, bring them to you, talking through them with council. So there's still some iteration that's going to be happening with some of those areas. So wanted to provide that update and heads up. The other item I wanted to mention, we can talk a little bit more as we get into the community resilience and well-being section, is that for the last several months, we've been talking about wanting to split that focus area into 2 subsections, one focused on kind of human resilience and one focused on wildlife and environmental resilience. As we started reviewing that section with our parks team, we acknowledge that many of the actions we are proposing around wildlife and habitat were actually covered in other city plans. The last couple remaining actions we felt like would actually fit into some of our focus areas. So what we'll present tonight is more of how the community resilience and well-being focus area is presented in the current climate action plan. So I can talk a little bit more about that as we get into that, but that's just a shift we've made in the last 2 weeks as we started vetting more internally. So with that, we will launch right in. So tonight, really, we are here to present some new, actually we have 2 new targets to present to you all or for consideration, and then to talk through actions for both the natural systems and water resources focus area and community resilience and well-being. So our main questions tonight are feedback on a revised natural systems target, feedback on the initial actions or concepts for actions for natural systems and water resources, And then similarly for community resilience, looking at that revised target and the proposed actions. And again, these actions are not detailed out. We are more presenting the concepts to get your feedback that we'd then be developing. So for our natural systems and water resources focus area, just a refresher of what that section of the climate plan covers is it's really focused on retaining trees, expanding our tree canopy and water conservation, and we'll be digging into the target next. All right, so really would be great to have Dan here to provide some more context as our expert, but we have been having conversations over the last few months about whether we should reconsider our tree canopy target in the climate action plan. The current target is 55% tree canopy by 2035. The city is around 51 to 52% right now. We've shared a bit with you all about this in the past, but reasons for reconsidering is not that we shouldn't have stretch goals in the climate action plan, but to get to 55% tree canopy is almost 300 acres of additional tree canopy that the city would need. We're not sure that's achievable. We've been pretty stable with our tree canopy over the last few years, and we are really still trying to increase that. But we feel like there's just not a lot of additional areas where we can build up huge amounts of tree canopy that would be needed to reach that target. One other thing that we're really interested in focusing on is that distribution of tree canopy and making sure that areas of our city that don't have a lot of tree canopy or high tree canopy score, that we're focusing more efforts in those areas, which is really important for reducing that heat island effect, cleaner air, more access to green space, etc. So as staff were talking through this, we came up with kind of 4 options. I guess there's a 5th option of course, keeping the existing target. But one we talked about was instead of having a 55% tree canopy target, that we move to more of a no net loss as one of our targets. And a second target would be around a tree, having something around a tree equity score where we try and reach a certain tree equity score for each of our neighborhoods. We talked through some other options, such as looking at possibly reducing that percent of tree canopy or maybe extending out the timeline. I think some complications that come with that is we have the 55% by 2035 and several of the city's plans. It's in our comprehensive plan. Those could absolutely be updated, but we weren't sure if the climate action plan should really be the driver to update those numbers. So staff, our recommendation was to look at more the no net loss and something around a tree equity score. So why don't we pause here? Well, when we get to the actions, I'll probably run through them all for this section and then we'll open up for discussion, but this is a really critical one that we'd really like the board's feedback on which direction to.
Do you want to clarify what no net loss means?
Sure. Yeah, I think no net loss would be basically maintaining what we have right now. That might mean changes within our community of where trees are, but essentially maintaining the tree canopy that we're at this point. Is there more you want to add to that? Yeah. And also Dan sent us some really great notes. One of our biggest jumps in tree canopy between 2011 and 2017 was as the Issaquah Highlands and the talus trees matured after those developments were built. That's when we really saw the biggest jump in our canopy. So just for some context. So yeah, really interested in feedback from the board on which direction we should go with the target, maintain it as it is, or look at some additions or modifications.
Nancy, I believe you were first.
Like 2 points to make on this one. You have the council, you just mentioned that a week ago you met with the council. And this is something potentially they could do something about with the right possibilities. It might be one of your solutions to take back to them, which is to stay with the 55% or something like that, which is a challenge, and how much land you could acquire. So I think that you've got one of your options to take to council for yourself. So that's my first point. The second one is, it's my understanding that DNR is doing, and I think this came from Connie, but I've spoken with her in person. They have some land, some timber sales planned not too far from Issaquah. If we could acquire that timber, could we get credit for that in our tree camp? And that would be something you could take to council, which is to acquire some of the timberlands that are planned for harvesting in the area and use that similar to what like PSC does as carbon credits. It may not be specifically in the city itself, and you could maybe partner with other cities that are also trying to meet these challenges. But I think that getting credit for trees that you can save that are not necessarily in the city limits is a good option to get you to 55%.
Good idea. I know I've been to Upper Crescent Valley where I live. They have several timber sales scheduled.
Yeah, and some of them aren't far from Issaquah.
That all, yeah.
That's all I had.
Can you explain the tree equity score a little bit?
Yeah, so it's American Forest. I may have David jump in here. We actually use this as part of our Lead for Cities certification. We use the tree equity score. It was also used for looking at priority neighborhoods for the tree giveaway program. But American Forest looks at basically how tree canopy is distributed across your cities and then rates those neighborhoods by how much canopy they have. And so I don't know if there's more details you want to provide on that.
Yeah, so the kind of going into that factor is a couple different things. It's tree canopy cover, it's social factors within neighborhoods, things like that as well. Generally, Issaquah scores very well on tree equity scores. That being said, we do have a couple neighborhoods that do have lower tree equity scores compared to others. Those are Old Town, South Cove, Issaquah Highlands, Central Issaquah. And so part of the idea of adding a target around tree equity, kind of separate from tree canopy target, right? Having them be complementary targets, but not, one target, is helping staff think through and make sure that we are prioritizing where new trees and new tree canopy is going to the point that Dave made earlier in the meeting around making sure we're trying to address urban heat island and ensure that folks across the city are really benefiting from those trees.
Thank you. So 300 acres, I know it's a stretch, but I would recommend not lowering it from 55%. I think you should meet that goal. It's fine not to make your goal. That speaks to the fact that we need more resources to connect this. We need more creative ideas. Hesitant to.
I'd second that.
I third it.
Great, thank you. We have Keith online too with the raise.
It's Tom first.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, following in that same vein, no net loss means hooray, we don't have to do anything. And that's not aspirational. So I like the aspirational goal. I think that it should drive specific initiatives to, yes, we do want to do something. And maybe we won't achieve our goal right away, but we'll make an increment of progress towards that goal versus hooray, we don't have to do anything. So I'm in favor of sticking with the 55% tree canopy goal. Whoever invented trees was a genius. So they're so giving. They're so giving to all the living things that are in the vicinity. Don't go over all those things, but it's an indicator too, as was mentioned before, of the ecological health of a environment. That canopy measure is tied to so many other things, and it's something that can be objectively measured. So it's a good measurement, in my view, for the environmental health of a community. So let's aspire to make it a little bit better. And on the 300 acre thing, I first would have to ask the question, well, are you thinking about all of the areas that are underplanted right now on land that the city already owns? I mean, I go by the lots along Issaquah Creek on Front Street, for example. There's quite a bit of opportunity there, a few acres, but that's just one example of some parkland already owned by the city that could have more trees on them and should have more trees on them, given the close proximity of the creek. And someday maybe they will. But there's other things like that within current ownership of the city of Issaquah. So significant progress could be made just by infill of the city of Issaquah land already owned. Without acquiring.
Should be good.
That's all?
Great. Keith?
Ethan and
Yeah, I might be alone here, but I actually like the first proposed new target with the tree equity scores. I think the 55% is a noble goal, but it's kind of monolithic. I think it's easy to kind of adhere to for that reason, but I think it doesn't capture nuance that things like tree equity scores do. And, not just the equity, but the ecosystem services, I think, aren't captured. That, not every tree is created equal. You could have ones that stabilize slopes or cool, salmon habitat in Issaquah Creek. And I think, if there's ways to capture that, great. But I think tree equity scores are a great first step. I mean, I don't know if there's any specific examples I know for sure of, but like maybe Emily Darst kind of park near Costco, that wetland over there is one where there might be historic floodplains of the Issaquah Creek, in town or something that are disconnected and forested now. And if we want to restore a floodplain with everything, all the good things that comes with, we might lose a few trees. And I think that brings me to my other point, which is, no net loss is kind of aspirational, I think, because you're constantly facing pressure from development, but you're also trying to get you're also constantly trying to replace trees that are dying. And so I think, it takes work just to maintain what we have. And it sounds like it's really difficult to find space for the new ones. I think these are good ideas being passed around, but I think, it'd be great to have a little bit more nuance, like with the tree equity scores as well.
Thank you. Anne, I believe you are next.
Hey, thanks everybody. Totally agree with what Keith just said. I love trees. I was just planting some today. But I also love the equity idea and, continuing the focus of planting a lot of trees along the Issaquah Creek and any place that we can, through Green Issaquah or giving the trees away or whatever that is. But totally agree that just keeping it at the 51%, if we're going to also build new homes and structures, that can, that is still work. We're still going to have to focus on planting more trees. And then, so I guess I can go either way. I don't think the 55, the over 300 acres is a goal that we're probably going to reach. And I actually do like to have goals that are realistic. So yeah, I support either one of these, but definitely like your new wording. So as long as the trees that we plant are safe, considering, forest fire, if we're not pressuring, we don't feel pressure to plant a bunch of trees in unsafe areas, like too close to homes and structures, then I'm good. So thank you so much for addressing this.
And Alex?
Thank you. I appreciate what everyone has said, and I do really agree. I was struggling with this one to figure out how I would want to comment on it coming into this meeting, because I don't like changing from the 55% to no net loss. I do appreciate the tree equity score, and I think that figuring out how to work that in, because I feel like that is kind of where we're going with Title 18 and the changes in our the code was kind of leaning more towards that kind of work in order to make it equitable across neighborhoods. Just using trees as the target is a hard thing for me to have for this natural systems area, because I don't feel like it actually captures natural systems within the city of Issaquah. There's so much more than trees, and as Keith was saying, it's very, very nuanced. Because when I'm looking at a map and I see the areas where I feel like are blank and could have trees, a lot of that is really wetlands. And so the type of vegetation that would come into there is still highly valuable, still gets a lot of the things and even more benefits than some of the just trees. But we wouldn't necessarily want to plant large trees in some of these floodplain areas. So I think that is how we can look at this from a habitat perspective. And maybe that is, I know Stacy and David, you're looking at where things are incorporated into other plans. So maybe that's captured in other city plans. But if we're looking as the city as a whole and some of these other properties, like Sammamish State Park comes to mind, I don't know if that gets captured in these numbers, but seems like one of the biggest areas where there's big open reed canary grass fields that really do need to be improved and could have huge impacts for tree increases, but also other type of vegetation coming in if we support the natural processes that are there. So I don't have, I don't know what the advice is on this one. It's a complicated target to try and focus in on and to figure out how to capture what's the best way to show how we're moving a target on the natural system.
Yeah, those are great comments, and thank you everyone for your comments. I think this is why we've really raised this target since the beginning of the ICAP update. Is it's a challenging one because it was pretty disconnected from a lot of the actions in this section. We've tried to create some more actions to connect back to the target, but what I'm hearing is maybe, I think, seem like some mixed support for whether we keep the 55% or do no net loss. Hearing general support maybe for adding a target around tree equity. And then from Alex hearing maybe we need something else that will capture really what we're trying to achieve with this section. Dan had sent some other data that they gather around stream buffers and riparian areas. We could kind of look at that and see if some of those that data that the city's already collecting could be developed into, or there could be a target associated with that that might capture more of the actions here. So maybe staff can kind of sit on this one a little bit more and see if there's another target we want to bring back.
Support some sort of metric around riparian buffers to be added in this area. From what I heard, Stacy, just summary.
Yeah.
I'm hearing kind of a mix between the tree equity scores and keeping the goal as high as we can, and asking you guys to go back and rethink that. I think everybody's in support of the tree equity idea.
Yeah. That sounds great. Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. That's something we'll bring back as one of the main discussions for our late March meeting.
So
I just think I wanted to go along with your initial, but we need to keep a very high bar for this. I believe the whole central Issaquah for the next 30 years is going to be completely redeveloped. And we need to be really deliberate in making green space in that area. And we can't lower the bar.
Yeah.
I can think of some creative ideas. I think there's a lot of areas around that are privately owned that we can come up with plans and ideas to incentivize landowners to add trees in space and places like the state park, places like the parks that are owned by Metro and along the freeways, we can find places to put trees, and then we'll need to really work to convince those owners to allow us to plant. We push the lower bar.
Dan, did you have another comment, or is your hand still up from the previous one?
And go ahead. If you can. You're muted.
You're muted here. Unmute her.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to turn it off. So maybe we could start thinking about outside of the box a little bit and maybe do like a food forest in Confluence Park and some different creative things like that. That was it. Thanks.
Thank you. As we're going to step into the actions or proposed revised actions next, if there are other ideas that come up around a revised target, definitely let us know. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, my comment dovetails into moving on to the actions, because I was trying to figure out how the actions that are proposed in this then equate to increasing canopy or these other things, and how some of the other things that we are trying to capture in the actions, especially some of the new water goals it seems like have been added, are not captured by this target. And so how we're going to track and show that we're completing these actions.
Okay, great. There's a mistake on the next slide. All right, David, I am seeing, I think did you spotlight the?
Oh,
Are folks online? Are you, hold on just a second, I'm just making an adjustment. There we go, great. Okay, yes, so I'm noticing I have one mistake in the table, so I'll walk through that. So what I'd like to do is walk through actually the next two slides, which are the set of actions, and then we'll take input. So the first action from the ICAP is we have current language around implementing our parks plan and green Issaquah plan. We are recommending revising that to update the name of the park systems plan, include the urban forest management plan that did not exist when the ICAP was written. And instead of calling out a subset of actions from those plans, note that their implementation is important as they advance the targets of the Issaquah Climate Action Plan. That's sort of the approach that we're starting to take with each of the other plans that we reference here. The next one is expanding. The current language is around expanding local sequestration on private property. Our recommendation is really to keep that. If we do add a tree equity score target, then we're recommending including some of that language into the action, that we would really be focused on areas with lower tree equity scores. The next one is we have language around updating the land use code to prioritize tree retention. That has been done, as you all know, after many, many meetings with Minnie and her team. That tree code is going to be revised. And so what we are recommending is, instead of calling that out specifically, that we have a more general target that speaks to integrating sustainability, environment, and climate considerations in city code and policy. The next one, I need to see what I did because I repeated that, the carbon sequestration. Oh, wait, sorry, that's local carbon sequestration on private land. Yeah, so I'm not sure what I did there. Let's skip over that one. Maybe we can check the ICAP. I don't know what I pulled in. All right, our next one is a new proposed action on mitigating the impact of invasive species on the urban forest to support resilience under a changing climate. This was an action that was raised as a high priority from the committees we met with last summer. It's been emphasized by the park board when we met with them, and you all seemed to support that when we talked through some of these draft actions last fall. Right, next one. The next one is currently reads as implementing the stormwater management plan. We're recommending just including the proper name of that plan, and then speaking again to those priority actions that support the intent of the climate action plan. The next one is around, the current language is around providing gray water reuse and low impact development education. In talking internally with staff, we recommend removing that. It is something that is being incorporated into the city's sewer plan. Next one is incentivizing low impact development projects. We recommend keeping that language. It is not something the city is actively working on right now, but given this plan maybe will be 5 or maybe even 10 years long, it's something that the city may take up in the future. Replacing the current action in the plan is around replacing aging stormwater infrastructure with low impact development. Staff are recommending removing that from the ICAP. It is part of the stormwater and surface water plan. Next one is around preparing stormwater management systems for high flow events. We're recommending keeping that. And then two last ones that are new. Hey, Anne, do you mind? Sorry, the last two are new. Promoting and incentivizing water conservation programs and technical support to reduce community-wide potable water use. And then the last one is around enhancing habitat and community outreach to build wildlife resilience to climate impacts. And that one comes out of discussions with our committees this summer, and is meant to increase consistency with the comprehensive plan, where this board really worked to bring in quite a bit of content on wildlife and habitat into the comprehensive plan. So that is our set of actions we have proposed for the natural systems focus area. We'll open it up to conversation, feedback, and we can toggle between those two slides.
Is your stormwater management plan integrated into the storm and surface water plan? Because they're two different things.
I think so. When we talked with the public works staff, they weren't sure what was meant by the stormwater management plan. They felt like the proper plan to say was the storm and surface water plan.
So asking you.
Okay.
Stormwater management program plan is a requirement of your permit. Storm and surface water system plan is the Panther system.
Okay, we'll ask them. Okay. They'll be here next month. We can talk to them too, but yeah, we'll check with them. Karen, have a question online. Right there, or comment.
Yes, Karen?
Yeah.
Karen?
Hi, so I wanted to ask, I had to look up what sequestration meant. And from what I can interpret from that is that we're like seizing property. I kind of wanted to ask what that meant. I guess I didn't really understand what that means.
Yeah, sorry, great question. So sequestration means more capturing carbon. So
Okay.
the language around local sequestration, it's meant to be, I'm not sure what the original intent was with the language in the plan, but most likely increasing or retaining tree canopy to because of the benefit of that carbon sequestration. But that's a great flag. A lot of people don't know what that means or may take it out of context. So that's something we can look at changing
Makes
that
much-
language. Yeah.
Makes much more sense. 'Cause I looked it up and it just says the
Thank you.
temporary removal of property, and that doesn't sound right.
Not what was intended there. Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
we'll simplify that language. Great flag.
Do you like the new one on mitigating the invasives?
Okay.
Because I mean, Alex made a good point about the canary grass fields over at the park. And it just brings out in my mind, there's probably 50 acres right there. 30 acres, I don't know. There's quite a bit. Get with Spanish State Park and come up with some sort of reforestation plan or habitat enhancement plan there.
Other comments? Yeah.
It's a comment, I would love to see something in this, an action to somehow reduce pollutants in our environment, some sort of action like to work with state legislation, legislators to reduce plastics and increase recycling. Make it a conscious effort for the city, do something to reduce this.
Yeah, great. So in the overarching actions focus area, we have a draft plan around reducing localized air pollutants. And then our waste section of the plan, we've incorporated quite a bit around the school gave feedback on kind of the single-use plastics reduction. So we have some of those in the other sections of the plan. You all will see that more comprehensive set of actions at our next 2 meetings. So I think if we're seeing a gap there too, let's make sure that we address it. But was there, I guess if there's a focus of that related to kind of the natural environment or water systems, we could make sure to incorporate it here. We do have some.
Seems like it goes in.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So much of the pollutants that we see in our.
In the waterways, yeah,
They're
okay.
getting in.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, in the materials and waste section, we can make sure it specifies that out too, or see if it fits better here.
Are you looking for something specific to the streams health?
Yeah.
Something like that, like reducing pollutant loading in the streams or just in general?
Yes, I'm thinking, for example, the state could really use a bottle bill. We need that's a container deposit bill for beer cans and pop cans and plastic bottles to reduce the amount of pollutants that are landing in our streams. We somehow need to get help, band together, try to make that happen. It's been 75 years and it hasn't. But we can get cities to jump on that. That's one of them. Also, just around town, you've got trash bins, really nice new trash bins. You could put some blue bins around town too for recycling. Education goals for teaching people how to take care of it.
And then Don, as you were just bringing up pollutants too, the committees we met with last summer, they're was some proposed language around pollutants in the water, even around PFAS and 6-PDD, PPDQ. We just, I think those are all very, very important. Do they belong in the climate action plan was a question we were asking. You could make the argument more floods, higher precipitation events, we may see more runoff. It just felt like a bit of a stretch to have them in the climate plan. So we don't have them in right now. I think if that's something the board wants to see, we can go back and revisit that and discuss, but.
I think they're appropriate in storm and surface water plan.
Okay.
I'd have to read it.
Yeah. Okay. And that'd be great to bring up next month. Any other comments on this section? I know you're seeing it separate from other sections of the plan.
Alex?
I just wanted to add when the Public Works folks, is that who manages the stormwater management plan, come next month, are they talking specifically about the permit process, that the updated permit plan, and not this storm and surface water plan that we're talking about citing in the ICAP now?
A good question. I will look and see what they're planning to talk about. I believe it's the permit process because it's public input that they're looking for.
Can we have them either back again to talk about the storm and surface water plan so we can see if that information is included in there, how pollutants are being managed, or how that, I assume that also has to go with flooding potentially. I'm not sure what that plan would include, so.
Yes. Yes, I can have them talk about that. Yep, we'll ask them to come at some point and talk about it.
Stacey, when you get a time check, it's 8:23.
Yep.
To go into this topic, we're gonna be stuck at for another 25 minutes here probably.
Yeah, we did give folks kind of a heads up, possibly going late, we already have 2 special meetings.
We can charge overtime.
Yes, there you go. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so next section, our last focus area of the plan is around community resilience and well-being. Again, this section really speaks to how our community is it did speak to how the community is preparing for a disaster. David and I have been working really closely with Jared over the last several months to look at ways to revise this section. So it really made sense for our community. And so we are looking at a revised target as well as some pretty significant revisions to actions and how we organize those actions. So moving into the target, I'll give an overview and then David, Jared, please jump in. The current target for this focus area is that emergency services serve 100% of Issaquah's population. We don't know how to measure that. We're not sure what exactly was intended. And so what we're proposing is that we look at something that is measurable. And one idea we came up with is looking at our community survey that the city does every 2 years. It's a statistically significant survey. And we have a rating in there for community satisfaction with emergency response. And so we set a target for ourselves of 85%. And that is our proposed new target for this area, thinking that it gets at the before, during, and after an emergency, and how the city is responding to that. So before looking at the actions, why don't we just take a moment to reflect on this proposed target and see if there's feedback from the group.
Well, 85% of what? I guess that could be achieved or not achieved depending on how you conduct the survey, who you ask, and how the question is asked. So there needs to be a little more clarification on that. Like 85% meaning they're either very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, or indifferent, would that be all considered as part of the 85%? And you only have to be really disgruntled to not, or, how is that break point established? There needs to be more clarity to that.
Yep.
For that to be, something that has meaning.
Yeah. Can clarify that. Go ahead.
I don't think the satisfaction rate would help you get prepared for. So people could be 85% satisfied today, have a wildfire. You might find total. So it's kind of disconnect person's satisfaction. That's from past experience. You're only satisfied after. Doesn't it's a measure of how you did it, not how you prepared.
Well, have those surveys been used post-event for the recent thing, the bomb cyclone, the flood? So you have a baseline?
Yeah, they're released every 2 years in the spring. So the most recent one was 2025. So it came after the bomb cyclone, and it's done through a national survey company where they keep sending out surveys until they get a significant, statistically significant response from the community.
Jared, do you remember what our baseline is?
It's pretty high. I think it's over 70.
Yeah, it's like 73 for some reason sticks in my head, but I was trying to find it right now to see where we're at. Oh, try to find it.
And does that percentage include those in the middle that are
No, it's
different?
the very high or satisfied or very satisfied is what's counted for.
Yes.
But we would specify out if we agree this is a good target, we can also look at the set of actions and then come back to. Yeah.
I can't see who is first.
Tommy, sorry.
Hi there. Just curious what is meant by emergency services, and maybe that has, and could you maybe expand on the challenge with, measuring that 2021 target?
We're not sure what was meant by emergency services, and we also didn't really have a way to measure if it meant that everyone had access to food, water, shelter during an emergency, or I don't know.
Right. Yeah, because it's like, police and fire are also, two very common, right, entities that fall under emergency service. And one could argue that, 100% of the squad is covered, by if you dial 911, right? Like, someone's going to come. And so, yeah, in the same sense, right, there's like so many different facets, right, to, emergency services that it seems like nebulous enough to where it didn't mean much for 100% of residents to be covered. So, sure. Unless you have other thoughts too. I'd love to, yeah.
I don't think the satisfaction rating is a bad idea. I just wonder also if it would paint a more complete picture, if it could be used in conjunction with scores like I think FEMA has a floodplain management kind of score that they can rate cities or areas on. I don't know if we're part of that, but there's also.
Hold on, you can hear us 1 second.
Doing a quick switch. Okay, can you try speaking again, Keith?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
No.
Oh,
There.
there, sure.
Can you try speaking again, Keith?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh no, here's Mike. Turn audio on.
Hold on, sorry.
Okay, what we're
All
gonna
right.
do.
We can hear him. We can hear
Yeah.
you, Keith.
Cool, thanks. Wonder why it's just me.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can't hear them at all now.
I can't either.
I think that's because
Can you hear
David
us now?
left. Oh, now we can.
Yes. Now we
Okay.
can hear you.
Okay.
Switch over computers. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Before my computer dies, so that's good.
Sorry, we had unexpected screen not working and the tablet not working. So, okay, go ahead, Keith.
No worries. I just wanted to pose that maybe we could use other metrics that are a little harder figures like scores for flood management in our community that I think is already available from the federal government. And I'm not so sure about wildfire risk, but I would imagine there's some services for that kind of scoring as well. I don't know if we currently participate in any of that.
Yeah, we're like a CRS community 6 right now. It's like our official score, but like, and that we do have goals to also in other plans to push us to higher levels in that part of part of public works is a plan that speaks to an action mitigation plan does too. But again, like I think the one sort of with that one is it doesn't like speak to like all the like disasters and emergencies, and those are mostly actions, right? Like just around, flooding for, in this case. So I'm kind of struggle, but you're right. That it is a good idea and something that we are tracking too and trying to get better, move up in Issaquah too. So.
Yeah, we'll take a look at those and see what we might be able to bring in, whether it's part of the target or some metrics associated with this section.
Raj?
Thanks. So, Stacy, my question is, when you talk about the satisfaction rating, especially a higher number like 85%, it is dependent on, how many community residents actually see the survey and participate in it. So there are multi-factors on which, the survey response will be dependent. And so you might have a better idea based on the current surveys done by the city. So I just wanted to make sure, if you have enough confidence that like most of the residents will see and a huge number of residents will participate, because it depends on that, just to consider.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think we picked the community survey because of the way that it's done, where it is not sent out to every resident. It is sent out to a select number of residents. If they don't get responses, they keep sending it out to folks until they reach the statistically significant response rate. So it's not necessarily that every community member is taking it, but it's just done in a way that is meant to be representative of the community. And these are done around the country. So that's why we had trust in this particular survey tool. But I'm definitely hearing from the group. It might be fine. We may want to look at some other factors. So maybe what we could do is turn to the actions and then see if there are any additional ideas that come out for a target that's representative. I think we just really struggled with this one because it's hard to find a target that represents how we're doing before, during, and after these emergencies. So.
Here's how it's phrased in the survey. I find it.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's overall efforts to ensure the community is prepared for emergencies. And we had 71% is satisfied, like 20% neutral, and then about the remainder 9% that were not to some level.
So just focus on preparedness. Okay. Well, we'll come back to this one. Why don't, again, I'll walk through the two. Oh, sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Okay. I honestly feel like the 85% satisfaction rating is not enough. And I say that because you talked about needing to get resilient centers in neighborhoods. That will help you get emergency centers services that serve 100% of Issaquah's population. So that is one of the tools you're using. So the 85% is a great one measure, but I don't think it's enough. I think you need to go further. I'm not sure the one we had previously is the right one, but I think you need something else to go with that because you're doing things to get there.
Okay.
Thank you. Keith, do you have another comment?
Yeah, just real quick, I know Stacy mentioned the phrasing of the question. I wonder if it's possible or advisable to change it to something a little bit more individually focused. Do you, as a community member, feel like you are prepared for a disaster or, secure in an emergency situation? Just because it seems like it might be a little bit more of a, I don't know, it seems like might get better data on, whether we kind of succeed or fail by how our community members feel as individual households in an emergency rather than, oh yeah, I think the city would be fine or do great.
Yeah, and we can change and add this in the survey.
Yeah. Point.
Okay, great. Thank you. Right. Well, why don't we take a look at the actions, and then if there's other ideas that come up for the target, please raise those, but otherwise we'll be taking kind of another look. So again, David and I worked really closely with Jared over the last few months to kind of reframe and also reorganize this section where we'll have it organized kind of in the prepare, respond, and then recover set of actions. So the first one in the current plan reads around developing climate emergency response systems. We're just recommending some minor shifts to that or changes to that language that really focus on networks and active engagement with community partners. Our second one speaks to protect vulnerable populations. We're recommending removing that because we feel like that is really integrated within all of the other actions. We have a new action we're proposing that is around education and outreach. The next one is around incentivizing, sorry, there's some spelling here, adaptation upgrades, not adoption upgrades. Sorry about that.
Adopting these days.
Man, I think I put this together while I was traveling over the weekend. So we are just recommending retaining that. We were going to possibly have a reference in there around wildfire resistance as a particular focus. Two new ones around increasing the resiliency of critical facilities. And then another one on collaborating with PSE and others to really streamline or upgrade our local grid capacity and resilience. The next set continues kind of that preparedness where we have current language around King County, working with King County on their wildfire preparedness strategy. We're recommending expanding that language that's not specific to King County's wildfire, but instead looking across emergency planning and really incorporating that climate lens. We have a new proposed action that came from our discussions this summer with the committees around enhancing our local food systems. Next one, we had conducting a vulnerability assessment. We're recommending removing that. We've completed the initial vulnerability assessment, and that is being integrated into the work at the city and will continue to be updated through some of these other actions. And then moving into response, this is a new action that would be providing response services during an emergency. For instance, how this relates to the work that we do under our climate action work is one of the photos Jared was showing was from our fan and filter giveaway. We do that as a resiliency measure to provide cooling and air filtration during heat and smoke events. And then the last one again is new. This is a recovery action, that implementing recovery efforts that reduce future and long-term exposure to climate risks. So that is the set. Sorry about the spelling errors there, but that is the set of community resilience and well-being actions that we are recommending. So quite a few revisions and several new actions for this section. Comments, questions, gaps that you're seeing?
I guess my only question for you is how are you gonna measure if you've been successful in these? And I'm reading the words on them. And similar to what you said about the overall actions, I don't know how you measure that you've accomplished any of these that and get them done. So I'd ask you to go back and think about them that way.
Yeah.
Are these measures something you can actually say we accomplished this, or this is how far we've gotten on it and track it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if we have a couple of minutes, David will talk a little bit about the metrics committee, and that's what they're really looking at. But yeah, that's a great question.
Especially on
have
the
on the
actions.
actions.
They're very subjective.
We're just introducing.
If you have some way to measure success, or if you've accomplished anything, especially if you're spending money on it.
Great feedback. Any gaps that folks are seeing? General look okay.
It's hard to tie to anything emergency management. I think we have a larger picture of emergency.
Right.
management. It's hard to tie it directly. to climate change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should say, sorry, I don't want to say a lot, but a lot of these we did right with certain projects or things that we were doing already in mind. So to speak to the measurability concerns a little bit, I do think we will be able to set metrics for many of them because they reflect in some ways some of our existing priorities.
Yeah. Or anticipated
Or
priorities.
anticipated ones.
But if you write them that way so that you can actually have those metrics
Yes.
incorporated into it will help.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is not fleshed out language. These are a little bit of the conceptual.
Tommy?
Just a little comment on the idea of incentivized adoption of upgrades for wildfire resistance. My wife and I are desiring to make incremental improvements to our property. And the big hurdle we had is to find a contractor that actually understands the problem and is able to implement solutions. And we've spent 6 months and gone through half a dozen contractors, and it's been tough. So the service the city could provide would be to pre-qualify some contractors that actually understand the problem, understand the language, and understand solutions. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think when we were talking through these actions, we were thinking specifically of you talked about your deck project, the work Anna's been doing. Those were some of the things we had in mind.
So online, I see Tommy and then Keith.
Thanks. I think it was on the other slide at the bottom, and I understand this is conceptual, big picture language, but implementing recovery efforts that reduce future long-term exposure to climate risks. Can you just help? Can you expand on that a little bit, just to help me understand what that is capturing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually at the city, right, we don't have a true plan that's been fleshed out before that speaks to like how we manage. Take an example for like a wildfire or something like that, right? Like if it burns a portion of a neighborhood, we don't actually have like a plan that really lays out all the details of how we want to go about either rebuilding, restoring, all the different facets, right? Like infrastructure, like changes, improvements, repairs that speaks to like a whole encompassing like effort around recovery. So really what that's speaking to is putting some resources into thinking about recovery post-disaster, post a major, long, big-scale disaster, and having some thought put into that before it actually happens, right? Before one does happen. So we're not caught, in a situation where we're just thinking about those things in the aftermath of one. So, yeah.
Another example would be like if a property is continuously flooded in a flooding situation, how are we thinking about recovery from floods so that either we're trying to protect that property or moving that property or buying that property to turn it into flood management parkland or, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the increasing resiliency for critical facilities. Does facilities include infrastructure like communications and transportation, or is that just buildings.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, Keith. It's really all critical infrastructure and elements of it. So yeah, that's good. That's a good change that we could clarify that action. Let's make sure that it operates that critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. And we do in our overarching and municipal actions, we have an action in there specific to city facilities. And here we were thinking kind of more broadly community facilities and infrastructure. We'll clarify that. Okay.
You go to the next page, please. I think the second one, enhanced local food systems, is kind of crazy. Doing expanding community gardens, that improves our quality of life, but it doesn't really improve resilience. I've done a lot of gardening here, vegetable gardening, and I get, I work on it all summer long, and I get enough food out of that for 1 or 2 meals. So, so I think we could maybe change that to be something like work to improve our supply chain or acquiring food from outside regions or something like that.
Okay.
In the event of, say, if we have a bridge broken, you can't get trucks in a safe way from one direction, you get them from another direction. Yeah, I don't think planting gardens is gonna help that much in this region.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a concept that came out of one of our summer committees. Yeah, I think thinking both for reducing food miles as a carbon saving tactic, but providing some access to local food. But yeah, I think it's a good point. Maybe there's some more language
Maybe
we
the
can
supply
put in
chain
there.
somehow making our supply chain more resilient.
Keith, do you have another comment?
Yeah, just on that exact subject, I think I want to just provide a little bit of a counterpoint or a couple, which is that I think having access to, community agriculture in some form or another doesn't just, I think, serve a practical, food in hand kind of benefit, but also gets people a little more connected to the source of their, food, gets them thinking about food security. I think it might have kind of less more indirect benefits for that resilience point we're looking for. And then also, I wonder, I mean, I'm no expert. I don't grow food for a living, but I volunteered at some food forests. And I know that I think Ann mentioned that earlier in the meeting, scaling up the community garden in Confluence Park to a bigger operation. I don't know, maybe there's kinds of economies of scale there where you could actually provide a significant amount of food from just a bigger plot of land, but I don't know.
Great. Yeah, appreciate all the feedback and also folks having some different opinions that we'll be thinking about as I mean, that's important. That's part of this board is to have those discussions and debate. So we'll be taking all those into consideration. Our next steps for the ICAP is we have been taking all the feedback you've been providing on each section, making those revisions. We've been vetting it with staff. Including we'll do the same with the feedback we received tonight. We are meeting with a number of other boards and commissions at the end of February. And then as mentioned, we'll be going back to the council committee. And then the plan is to bring you all revised actions, targets at the end of March special meeting. We'll go through that so you can see cleaned up version and all the input that's been incorporated. And then most likely the special meeting in April would be bringing you the full draft, but you would have first look at those revised actions and targets going into that full draft. Great. Thank you for all the feedback. We do have a couple brief updates. If folks can bear with us for a couple minutes. Thank you for staying late. But I'll do a couple quick updates and then if you want to talk briefly about metrics. Our board applications are still open for boards and commissions. We have not had a ton of applicants, so please spread the word. As a reminder, for environmental board, we have one youth position opening, one regular, and all 3 alternate positions. It does close officially on Sunday. And let's see, I talked about PDE. We are starting to kind of coalesce around some ideas around our project with our sister city in Morocco. And we are now looking for a representative from some of our boards and commissions that will sit on a committee to help really frame up that project. It would likely be a commitment of 3 meetings, meeting with a rep from the Sister Cities Commission, Arts Commission, and possibly the Youth Advisory Board. So if you are interested, please let me know. Those meetings would probably happen late spring, summer, with some kind of event in the fall. Other brief updates, if you have not been following council news, council did appoint a new member, Paula Dare, who actually was previously on the park board, was appointed to council at the end of January. Why don't you talk about metrics?
All I'll say is we have a metrics committee going on to help us think through this question of how we deal with metrics in the climate action plan. We'll be talking about those recommendations later in March.
And Praj?
Yes, Praj is a participant, as well as Sridhar and Jamie from a previous environmental board member as well as some others.
And then this evening, you should have received an invitation to an event on the 24th, a Save Issaquah Light Rail event that the mayor is hosting. Please spread the word about that. And then just as a reminder, our March meeting will be not on the ICAP. We'll be talking about the TIP and double check which plan. I think the stormwater management plan. And then we will have that special meeting at the end of March to speak to the ICAP. That's it.
Do you have a date for that special meeting? Did you send something out?
March 25th, and then I think Earth Day we're meeting as well, April 22nd, I want to say, but I'll send out a reminder about those.
Okay. Great thoughts. All right, Bridget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for managing all that.